Liebe Kolleginnen, liebe Kollegen, herzlich willkommen heute Morgen in der Bundespressekonferenz. Sehr viele Gäste haben wir, die nicht Mitglieder der Bundespressekonferenz sind, die sich aber angemeldet haben, weil sie das Thema interessiert. Und auch wir sind froh, uns heute Morgen kümmern zu können um die Frage, wie weit reichen die nationalen Klimaaktionspläne? Eine Bilanz des Klimasekretariats der UN. Und da freuen wir uns besonders, dass wir als unsere Gäste Christiana Figueres, die Generalsekretärin des UNFCCC, begrüßen dürfen und Staatssekretär Jochen Flasbarth. Ein Hinweis darauf, Kanal 1 ist in Englisch, Kanal 2 in Deutsch, wenn Sie die Simultanhilfe in Anspruch nehmen wollen. Und wir starten. Welcome, Ms. Figueres. The floor is yours. Please give us an introduction.
Vielen Dank, Dr. Mainz. Und darf ich mich erstmal ganz herzlich bedanken für die sehr nette Einladung. Es ist eine große Ehre, hier in der Bundespressekonferenz zu sein. Und jetzt auf Englisch. So good morning to all of you, and thank you very much for joining us here today. This is quite an exciting moment to be able to launch the report of the aggregate impact of the national climate change plans called the INDCs. It is my intent today to make this report a little bit more understandable because those of you who have had a quick look at it will see that it is highly technical, and I shall try to make it a little bit more understandable for all of us. But before I go into that, I think it is important to understand that this is actually already 1 month ahead of the start of the Paris Climate Change Conference. This is already the first deliverable of COP21. It is very clearly an unprecedented engagement of so many countries across the world with the challenge of addressing climate change, both from an emission reduction perspective, called mitigation, as well as from the perspective of how to deal with the negative impacts of climate change, called adaptation. This report is the culmination, I would say, of 2 years' work, because it was actually 2 years ago that governments in Poland, in Warsaw, Poland, decided that they would prepare these national contributions, and then last year, in the midst of that preparation, they gave themselves a deadline for when they would want to have this finished, and that was then established as October 1 of this year. So by October 1 of this year, we had a very, very impressive number of these national climate change plans. That does not mean that the Secretariat has now closed its doors, quite to the contrary. The doors remain very open, and we have actually had 10 more climate change plans, or INDCs, that have been submitted to us since then. However, the report only covers the INDCs that had been submitted to us by October 1. And you will see in the little pager that we distributed to you and in the report several numbers that I will try to demystify for you. So by October 1, we had 119 INDCs, and that is the number that you will see in the little 4-pager. That, however, corresponds to both 146 countries, but also corresponds to 147 parties. And now you will ask, how is that possible? The reason why that is possible is because the European Union, in and of itself, is also party to the convention. So it is an additional party, if you count parties that have ratified the convention, but it is obviously not a country. That should explain to you why we have 146 countries, but 147 parties. Independently of that, let me say that we now have, with these 146 countries, we have the national climate change plans from all industrialized countries without exception. That is very important and quite historic. And we have 75% already of all developing countries. Indeed, also quite a historic marker that has been reached. Together, they represent 86% of greenhouse gases. Most of these national climate change plans are national in scope, and at least a half of them mention the use of carbon markets in order to make their contributions possible. About a half of them speak not only about emission reduction targets and intents that they have for either 2025 or 2030, but actually go beyond 2030, some to 2050, and throughout that period, they do foresee an increasing decarbonization of their economy. Finally, just to give you raw data, and then I will tell you what we have learned, but the other raw data that is quite interesting is that there is only 25% of the emission reductions that are in the aggregate in these national contributions that are actually conditional on support, on either financial or technical support. The rest are unconditional. Those are the facts. Now I would like to share with you what did we actually do with these facts? What do we learn from our analysis of these facts? The first is that this is a truly unprecedented engagement of all countries because each of these INDCs represents a robust and very far-reaching consultation inside each of the countries, a cross-sectoral consultation, such that the engagement now with climate change is much deeper and much broader in every single country. The second that these represent as aggregate is that we do see a declining per capita emission intensity over time. So these numbers would tell you that we would be, if fully implemented, and we can talk about that, but if fully implemented, these INDCs would bring us to a per capita reduction of up to 8% by 2025 and 9% by 2030, already including, of course, I'm going to remove my phone here, okay. Already including population growth as projected by the United Nations. The third piece that we understand there, that we have analyzed, is that as a whole, if these INDCs are fully implemented, they represent 4 gigatons of emission reductions globally. 4 gigatons. This is our estimation, but I'm happy to share with you that it is also approximately the estimation of every other analysis that has been done. And with that, I would like to introduce to you the idea that this is our analysis. It is the official analysis that governments have requested, but it will not be the only analysis. You will see many think tanks, many institutions running the numbers with different assumptions and with different methodologies. So you will see some variation in the numbers. However, all the analysis that we have seen up until now agree that we have more or less 4 gigatons of emission reductions by 2030. If you take it 5 years before to 2025, we have approximately 3 gigatons. And then by the final date, by 2030, we have approximately 4 gigatons. The governments did not request the Climate Change Secretariat to do the extrapolation of the emission reductions to temperature, which is why we did not do that. However, I will share with you that based on the same figures that we have used for emission reductions, the International Energy Agency has run their extrapolations of the temperature impact of these emission reductions by 2030, and they have extrapolated the temperature rise that would be there by 2100, which is the reference year for all temperature data. And the very good news that comes out of that is that without these INDCs, we would be on track for a temperature rise of anywhere between 4 to 5 degrees centigrade, and I'm sure that is the data that you have seen over the past few years of a temperature rise with unabated climate change, unaddressed climate change of 4 to 5 degrees. With these INDCs fully implemented, we're looking at a temperature rise by 2100 of certainly under 3. In fact, the International Energy Agency puts it at 2.7 degrees. That is good news because it does mean that we are moving in the right direction, that we have a very, very important first step, and we're moving in the direction of bringing the temperature down toward the final defense line that governments have established of staying under 2 degrees. There is, however, a difference of staying under 3 degrees and staying under 2 degrees. So it is a very good step. It is actually a remarkable step, but it is not enough. Finally, to take it to more of an interpretive level, we derive the conclusion that what we're seeing here with these INDCs is that we are truly, incontrovertibly, and very decisively moving down toward the transition toward a low-carbon economy. That transition has already started because I will have you know that many of these INDCs are building on carbon-reducing policies and measures that are already in place. So this doesn't start from zero, from ground zero, but it does indicate that this transition toward a low-carbon economy has already started. It also indicates that with these efforts, we are not yet at the below 2 degrees. So what does that mean for COP21? It means that Paris COP21, with respect to emission reductions, and then we can talk about adaptation in the question and answer period, but with respect to emission reduction, Paris needs to have 2 components. First, governments must decide how they are going to gather all of these INDCs and how will they anchor them in the agreement. For the time being, all of these INDCs have simply been sent, and we have put them on a web page, but that does not provide them with any legal standing. So that is the first decision that governments will have to make. How are they going to anchor these INDCs in the Paris Agreement? The second piece that is going to be equally as important for the Paris Agreement in COP21 is to address the question of, and then what happens? Because since we already know that these INDCs do not get us to under 2 degrees, and governments know this as well, we do have a commitment from governments that is already evident in the text of not only staying with these INDCs, but actually within the Paris Agreement itself, of already building a path of progressive, incremental effort of continuous improvement, if you will, for there to be a periodic review, a marker, a checkpoint in which countries would come together, perhaps every 5 years, although that hasn't been determined, to assess for themselves how are they doing on the progress of getting onto the 2-degree pathway, and then how much more effort is possible at that point in time. So these 2 components of the Paris Agreement are really critical to understand because they are fundamentally different from the way the Kyoto Protocol was structured, which was a static emission reduction average per year. That is not the concept that governments are working toward under the Paris Agreement. They're working toward certainly establishing the baseline with these INDCs, but then the agreement itself will have the nature of being a dynamic agreement of constant improvement and constant increase in efforts. I will leave it there for the time being and happy to answer questions later.
Thank you. Herr Flasbarth.
Ja, vielen Dank. As we are webcasted through the UNFCCC channel, I will start with a few remarks in English and switch over to German later on. First of all, thanks to Executive Secretary Christiana Figueres for choosing Berlin as a city to present the synthesis report. Germany is certainly proud to be the host country for the Secretariat, and let me take this opportunity to underline again that we are committed to give our best support available for the work of the Secretariat. Echoing what has been said by Christiana Figueres, I want to underline that the aggregate INDCs are a first and very important step forward. There is a clear positive message from our side combined with a but. The positive message is we now have, as has been mentioned, more than 3/4 of countries, parties that have presented their national INDCs, their national climate targets and climate actions plans. And looking at the aggregate INDCs, we are altogether doing much better than at least I have expected a couple of years ago. And I think I share this with most of the experts negotiating around the world on the new climate regime. As also has been mentioned before, not the assessment by the Secretariat, because this was not requested by parties, but the assessment of the IEA and other private institutions, such as Climate Crackers, came to the conclusion that we are at around 2.7 degrees, limiting the global warming by 2.7 degrees in the course of this century. And that is certainly better than 4 or 5 degrees increase of global warming. And it's worse than 1.5 or 2 degrees. And if somebody wants to quote me on that, please quote the full sentence, because it's essential that we pass the message on the two sides of the coin. We are doing much better, and we have proven that countries can make a difference on combating climate change, but we are not where we should be and where we have to be in the course of these years. We must not accept any global warming above 2 degrees, and better not above 1.5 degrees. One additional remark that is very important. Most of the INDCs are unconditioned. All of the INDCs from industrialized countries are unconditioned. And some of the INDCs from developing countries have the condition that sufficient financial support is provided during the next years and later on decades. That underlines again how important it is that donor countries, industrialized countries, stick to their announcement that we will provide 100 billion international climate financing coming from different sources, both public as private. And I want to underline again that Germany is committed to this announcement, and that we will take roughly around something like a 10% share of this 100 billion. Auf Deutsch möchte ich noch ergänzen, die nationalen Klimaschutzpläne, die nationalen Klimaschutzziele, die weltweit jetzt von mehr als 150 Staaten bereitgestellt worden sind, machen deutlich, dass der Klimaschutz weltweit vorankommt. Es ist ganz offenkundig, dass die meisten Staaten der Welt den Klimaschutz heute ernster nehmen als noch vor einigen Jahren. Aber wir müssen auch sehr deutlich sagen, dass wir noch nicht da sind, wo wir sein müssen. Wir haben Fortschritte gemacht. Wir werden absehbar weitere Fortschritte machen, aber diese werden noch nicht ausreichend sein, um die gesteckten Klimaschutzziele weltweit zu erreichen. Es ist deshalb essentiell, dass der Pariser Vertrag, den wir ganz sicher Ende des Jahres gemeinsam verabreden werden, nicht als Endstation der internationalen Klimaverhandlungen verstanden wird, sondern als Startpunkt für weitere Ambitionssteigerungen. Analysen von Wissenschaftlern und Institutionen, nicht zuletzt der Internationalen Energieagentur, zeigen, dass die bisherigen Klimaschutzziele und Planungen bei 2,7 Grad Temperatursteigerung landen würden. Das ist besser als 4 oder 5 Grad und schlechter als 1,5 oder 2 Grad. Aber wir müssen erkennen und wir können erkennen, dass wir eine positive Dynamik durch den Verhandlungsprozess jetzt schon ausgelöst haben. Ich will betonen, dass diese 2,7 Grad gleichwohl noch nicht der Endpunkt sind und dass sie auch nur erreicht werden, wenn tatsächlich das, was an Planung vorliegt, dann auch umgesetzt wird. Und dass das nicht immer ganz leicht ist, das hat man auch in der Vergangenheit gesehen. Das heißt, diese 2,7 Grad sind noch nicht sicher. Andererseits ist es so, dass wir sehr genau wissen, dass eine Reihe von Staaten nicht alles auf den Tisch gelegt haben, was sie auf den Tisch legen könnten, dass sie zum Teil national größere Ambitionen haben, als sie international bekannt gegeben haben. Wir sind hier in Deutschland zum Beispiel aus unseren vielen engen Gesprächen mit China ganz sicher, dass China selber die Ambition hat, noch mehr und noch frühzeitiger zu leisten, sodass wir Momente haben, die sagen wir mal, vorsichtig betrachtet werden müssen, aber auch welche, die weiter optimistisch sein lassen können. Was folgt daraus nun? Der Klimavertrag muss und wird Ende des Jahres in Paris aufgesetzt werden müssen. Wir müssen jetzt daran arbeiten, in den letzten Wochen, dass die Architektur robust und gut ist und deshalb auch dazu in der Lage ist, zukünftige Klimaanstrengungen auszulösen. Wir müssen, alle Staaten müssen, übrigens auch Europa als Staatengemeinschaft, müssen ihre Ambitionen über die Zeit weiter steigern. Wir müssen die Klimafinanzierung sauber bereitstellen, durch öffentliche wie auch durch private Finanzierungsanteile. Und nicht zuletzt dürfen wir nicht aus dem Blick verlieren, wohin das alles führen muss. Wir sind in Deutschland davon überzeugt und haben das im G7-Kontext auch unterstrichen, dass am Ende eine vollständige Dekarbonisierung der Weltwirtschaft stehen muss. Das heißt, im Laufe dieses Jahrhunderts müssen wir unsere Ökonomien ohne fossile Energieträger organisieren.
Vielen Dank. Wir kommen zu Fragen. Es beginnt Herr Kreuzfeld. Das Mikro, können Sie näher ans Mikro gehen?
I'd be interested to know if there's also a number for the temperature rise if only the unconditioned pledges would be fulfilled and not the conditioned ones. How much temperature rise would that mean?
You know, we in the Secretariat didn't run the temperature numbers, and I'm not sure that IEA did either. But I can tell you, as I said, that it's only 25%, only 25% of the emission reductions are conditional. The other thing that I would like to add, as Staatssekretär Flasbarth has said, is that I'm not sure that that math can be done as clearly as we would want, because many countries have been healthily conservative in what they have put on the table. And that's very understandable, because they do not want to expose themselves prematurely internationally, although they know that they may be able, or in fact pretty clearly able, to go far beyond. So we may get more from some corners and less from others, and so I don't think that, you know, whether it's 2.7 or 2.8 or 2.9 without the conditionals, I think the main message here is that there is a very, very impressive movement away and down from 4 degrees or 5 degrees, and that that is possible and that is being shared among all countries in the way that they have decided how to assume their different capabilities, but that is not enough. So both parts of the sentence have to be there.
Herr Scholz?
Scholz, keiner. Können Sie noch mal was zur Verbindlichkeit sagen und wo sehen Sie die größten Einsparpotenziale?
Also die nationalen INDCs, die jetzt an das Sekretariat übermittelt werden, werden Teil des Klimavertrages sein. Es ist eine noch offene Diskussionsfrage zwischen den Vertragsstaaten, ob diese INDCs, wenn sie dann NDCs werden, also nicht mehr Intended, sondern National Determined Contributions, ob die dann ebenfalls Teil der völkerrechtlichen Bindung sein werden. Die Europäische Union und Deutschland vertreten diese Position. Es ist aber kein Geheimnis, dass nicht wenige Staaten und was die Emissionsmenge angeht, auch bedeutende Staaten sich mit diesem Gedanken schwer tun. Ich glaube aber, dass, und Frau Figueres hat das gerade gesagt, ich glaube, dass wir inzwischen ein anderes Moment erreicht haben. Das, was wir beobachten können, ist, dass es eine Bereitschaft gibt, selbst etwas zu gestalten, in die Hand zu nehmen und einen Beitrag zu leisten. Ich will noch nicht so weit gehen zu sagen, dass wir einen Wettbewerb um das schönste INDC haben, aber wir sind auf dem Weg dahin und deshalb glaube ich, dass wir eine politische Verbindlichkeit bekommen, deren Ausmaß höher ist, als es je zuvor gewesen ist.
If I could add a thought to that, I fully agree, but also, in addition to that, history shows that internationally legally binding compliance mechanisms are not necessarily a guarantee of compliance. And we can look at a couple of situations under the Kyoto Protocol where countries adopted the protocol, then didn't ratify, or countries adopted, ratify, and then didn't comply. So, you know, I would warn us against simplistic thinking that internationally legally binding means a guarantee. From my perspective, what I think governments are pursuing here is paradoxically stronger than a very, very narrow legally binding structure for the very powerful reason that these national contributions are stemming out of national interest. There is not a single policy and measure or target or intent that is in any of these, of the sum total that we have now of 156 INDCs, that our countries are doing against their national interest. That is actually the strength of them, because there has been a realization over the past 5 years that there is not a competition between advancing on the global agenda and strengthening national development. Quite to the contrary, these two things actually overlap and are very complementary. And so you will see, if you examine these INDCs within the national boundaries, that they all stem out of the national interest of these countries and hence stand a much better chance of being implemented than anything that is external and punitive.
Zusatz?
Ja, zu den Einsparpotenzialen gibt es da Tendenzen, stärker in der Industrie, stärker beim Verkehr. Wo sind die Haupteinsparpotenziale im Augenblick bei den vorgelegten Plänen?
In energy savings, we do have quite a few of INDCs that have come forward with energy efficiency, industrial energy efficiency, certainly transportation, as well as consumer, residential, and buildings. So in every sector of energy efficiency, they are all represented, not in each INDC, but certainly across all the INDCs, all the sectors of potential energy efficiency and energy saving are represented.
Herr Hartwig.
Herr Flasbarth, könnten Sie mal darstellen, wo Deutschland im Wettbewerb, den Sie gerade schon angesprochen haben, der 147 Vertragsstaaten liegt, die ihre Aktionspläne jetzt vorgestellt haben? Liegt Deutschland in der Spitzengruppe oder im Mittelfeld oder vielleicht sogar ganz hinten?
Fast wäre mir lieber, Christiana Figueres könnte das sagen, dann, ich bin ja dazu gehalten, auch bescheiden zu sein. Aber ehrlich gesagt fühlen wir uns sehr gut aufgestellt. Wir sind ja Teil des INDC, das durch die Europäische Union abgegeben worden ist, mindestens 40% bis 2030 innerhalb der Grenzen der EU. Das ist ein ambitioniertes Ziel. Innerhalb der Bewertung der Beiträge, die Institute vorgenommen haben, wird das als Medium Range angesehen. Das finde ich angemessen, weil auch wir ja erkennen, dass wir noch besser werden müssen. Deutschland hat innerhalb der EU traditionell innerhalb dieses Bubble einen größeren Anteil übernommen. Und Sie wissen, dass, oder ich erkläre, dass wir bis 2030 in Deutschland mindestens 55% Treibhausgasminderung bringen wollen. Ich glaube, das ist angemessen. Damit sind wir ganz sicherlich kein Schlusslicht.
You want to add? Okay. Herr Grimm.
Would you tell us which states have to do more to protect the climate?
All of them.
And what's about the big states like China and the United States? How do you think they are proceeding with their national climate goals?
The reason why I say all countries is because this is a shared responsibility. It doesn't mean that all of them need to increase or can increase in the same manner. And clearly differentiation needs to be there, and they have all already self-differentiated for themselves in their INDCs. With respect to the leadership of the United States and China, it is an indisputable leadership. We went last year to the Lima COP on the heels of the first agreement between the United States and China, and we have a second agreement between the United States and China to take us into this COP. The European Union has also had an agreement with China, and Germany has a bilateral agreement with Brazil, just to name a few of what I think are very, very helpful bilateral or multilateral agreements that are actually constructing a very sound basis. There is no doubt that every country is looking for increased opportunities, not just within their national borders, but in coming together and in these bilateral agreements, they're actually looking to where they can contribute more in coordination and collaboration with each other.
Frau Ernstein?
Ja, ich hätte gerne gewusst, welche Länder fehlen denn noch? Sind da noch wichtige Länder, große Länder dabei, die noch keinen Plan abgegeben haben? Und vielleicht können Sie auch noch etwas zu Indien sagen.
India is already in. No, there is no large country that is not there yet. In fact, as I mentioned, we already have 86% of global greenhouse gases covered, 80% of all countries. So the ones that are still to come are much smaller economies and economies that understandably have had a more difficult time to do the analysis. But all industrialized countries are in, all emerging developing countries are in, and most of the middle-sized economies are in, and many of the small economies are in.
Vielleicht kann ich zu Indien kurz ergänzen, weil wir gerade die indisch-deutschen Regierungskonsultationen hatten, auch dort eine Klimaerklärung verabschiedet haben. Es ist erkennbar, dass Indien eine aktivere Rolle selbst spielen will. Das sehr defensive Herangehen aus der Vergangenheit finden wir nicht mehr. Präsident Modi hat in den Gesprächen deutlich gemacht, dass Indien seinen Beitrag leisten will. Indien hat ein besonders großes Interesse an Technologietransfer. hat große Sorge, dass wichtige Klimatechnologien exklusiv nur den Industriestaaten zur Verfügung stehen. Wir haben deshalb vereinbart, dass wir gerade die Technologiezusammenarbeit nicht nur mit Indien, sondern insgesamt noch stärker unterstreichen wollen. Aber man kann sehen, dass aus der, sagen wir mal, sehr zurückhaltenden Rolle Indiens etwas Aktiveres geworden ist, immer mit dem Zusatz, dass Indien für eine nach wie vor rasch wachsende Bevölkerung eben auch Entwicklungsperspektiven haben und nutzen will.
In fact, to give you some numbers of what Staatssekretär Flasbarth just said, it is really quite impressive that the Indian INDC puts forward 175 gigawatts of solar energy, which is the equivalent of the entire installed capacity of energy of the United States today. Both India and China have, of course, much larger energy needs than other countries because of their population, and it is actually quite heartening to see that both of them are looking increasingly toward renewable energy. Prime Minister Modi now organizing the most fantastic title of a summit that I have ever heard. It's called the Sunshine Summit. And it is a summit where he's bringing technology experts from all around the world to look specifically at the radiation conditions in India and the sun radiation conditions of the tropical countries that have a different radiation condition, because he would like to spur technology that is very specific for that very privileged sun exposure. So I think those are, very specific examples of the engagement of the Indian government with renewables, but most particular with solar.
Frau Kollegin, bitte. Ja.
I wonder what space has been given by the national governments overall to nuclear energy?
What space has been given to nuclear? It's a very good question that I cannot answer right now, but I promise to look at that. I don't know. I didn't follow the nuclear in the INDCs. Can I get back to you on that?
Okay. You can send it to our people. Herr Kollege, da, ich weiß nicht, das Mikro sehe ich nicht.
Das ist wichtig.
Ja? Okay.
Okay, thank you. You said there has to be an agreement in Paris, and you also said all the countries has to do more. How positive are you about the possibility that there will be a good agreement which will fit the 2 degrees mark?
I didn't say there has to be an agreement. What I said was that the agreement has to have 2 very important components, both the gathering and anchoring of the INDCs, but also the longer-term pathway. Period, new paragraph. There will be an agreement. And there will be an agreement because from where I stand, I see only increasing political will on the part of all governments to come to an agreement. In part because there is no country that has been exempted from negative impacts of climate change. In part because all governments have seen that the technology is much more accessible now in terms of cost. And in part because of the realization that this actually is something that they can do together. If, however, the Paris Agreement only takes the first part of my equation, only the INDCs, the Paris Agreement would not address the 2-degree limit. That is why the Paris Agreement needs to take the INDCs, but also complement it with the path of continuous improvement. And that would lead to the 2 degrees.
Da das auch auf meine Bemerkung angesprochen hat, also ich glaube, wir müssen ein Abkommen bekommen, und ich bin ganz genauso sicher, wir werden auch eins bekommen. Die letzten Meter müssen wir jetzt nutzen, dass es auch wirklich gut und robust ist. Wir haben jetzt einen Text vorliegen nach der letzten Verhandlungsrunde in Bonn. der brauchbar ist, mit dem man arbeiten kann. Er könnte auch noch etwas schöner sein. Wir hätten vielleicht auch etwas kürzer. Wir hätten auch etwas schneller vorankommen können, wenn das, was zum Beginn der letzten Verhandlungswoche vorgelegt worden ist, die Interessen der Entwicklungsländer noch besser reflektiert hätte. Das haben wir auch offen gesagt. Aber ich sehe, dass die Differenzen über die letzten Monate immer geringer geworden sind und definitiv überbrückt werden können.
Termin.
Danke schön. Frau Figueres, vielleicht könnten Sie uns schon etwas zum Ablauf der Konferenz in Paris sagen. Kommen die Staats- und Regierungschefs nur am Anfang oder kommen sie vielleicht auch noch zum Ende? Können Sie uns schon sagen, wer von den großen Staaten den Präsidenten oder den Staatschef, Regierungschef entsenden wird?
Yes, gladly. The French President Hollande, it was his decision to change the tradition of the COPs where heads of state or political leaders usually come at the end. He decided that he would want to invite them for the beginning, following the logic that in this case, what is very necessary is high-level political guidance at the beginning to finish the job. And so he has sent personal letters to all heads of state for inviting them to be in Paris on Monday, November the 30th. Those answers go to the French Élysée. They don't come to us, but the French presidency has already been very public that they already have over 80 confirmations of heads of state who are coming, including all the large countries. That does not mean that heads of state are then no longer invited. Heads of state are always welcome to come at any point in time, but they have a very specific invitation to come for the Monday.
Herr Kreuzfeld.
Hat sich erledigt.
Hat sich erledigt. Herr Grimm, bitte.
Herr Flasbarth, ich hätte mal eine Frage für die osteuropäischen oder bezüglich der osteuropäischen Partner. Die setzen ja weiterhin sehr stark auf Braunkohle für die Energieerzeugung. Nun hat es in Polen einen Regierungswechsel gegeben. Die neue Partei an der Macht, die PiS, hat sich stark für die eigenen Kumpel und Minen ausgesprochen. Was bedeutet das für die Verhandlungen in Paris? Und eine zweite Frage, die reichen Industrieländer wollen ja die Entwicklungsländer mit jährlich, glaube ich, 100 Milliarden unterstützen. Wird es denn auch Geld geben für die Länder, die im starken Maße Erdöl und Kohle exportieren, weil im Zuge der Dekarbonisierung müssen diese Rohstoffe ja im Boden bleiben. Gleichzeitig wäre das ja für die Länder ein gewaltiger Verlust an Wohlstand. Wie sieht es da aus im Zuge der Gespräche vor dem Start der großen Konferenz?
Eine ganze Reihe von osteuropäischen Ländern sind noch stärker auf Kohle angewiesen derzeit als die mittel- und westeuropäischen Länder. Das war bisher schon ein, sagen wir mal, nicht ganz leichter Diskussionspunkt innerhalb der Europäischen Union. Das wird ja auch nicht hinter verschlossenen Türen ausgetragen, sondern auf offener Bühne. Deshalb kann das jeder beobachten. Dahinter steckt die Sorge, beispielsweise in Polen, dass man sich von Entwicklungsperspektiven abschneidet, wenn man diese Ressource nicht weiter nutzt. Das wird vermutlich mit der neuen, jetzt ins Amt kommenden Regierung noch weiter unterstrichen. Und daraus gibt es nur eine Konsequenz. Wir müssen noch mehr reden. Wir haben in der Vergangenheit schon viel geredet, haben auf die Weise vieles erreicht. Wir müssen überzeugen, wir können diese nicht kleine Gruppe innerhalb der Europäischen Union nicht durch Versuche von Mehrheitsentscheidungen auf Dauer für den richtigen klimaverträglichen Weg gewinnen, sondern wir müssen deutlich machen, klar machen, dass auch innerhalb der Europäischen Union ein Solidaritätsprinzip gilt, das wir ja auch international anwenden. Auch da lassen wir ja gelten, dass einige Staaten noch mehr auf fossile Energien angewiesen sind und wir sie in dem Weg hin zu kohlenstofffreien Wirtschaften unterstützen. Was die Frage der Unterstützung international angeht, so ist unsere Überzeugung, dass Unterstützung von denjenigen bereitgestellt werden muss, die dazu in der Lage sind. Das sind mehr Länder, als es ursprünglich mal in den 90er Jahren auf dem Annex der Industrieländer waren. Und dass die Hilfe an die Länder gehen muss, die darauf auch angewiesen sind. Ein Land, das sehr viel Geld verdient bisher mit Erdöl oder mit Kohleexporten, ist für mich nicht ersichtlich auf diese Hilfe angewiesen, sondern kann seinen Transformationsprozess aus der gegenwärtigen Wirtschaftskraft heraus gestalten. Und wenn es Länder gibt, die genau dazwischen liegen, solche Länder gibt es, die als Entwicklungsländer klar zu klassifizieren sind und deren erhebliche Einnahmen aus dem Export fossiler Energien kommen, dann wird das ein Fall sein, wo man sich auf Hilfen nicht verschließen kann.
Frau Ehrenstein.
Ja, vor 6 Jahren inzwischen um diese Zeit wurde ja auch ein Gipfel vorbereitet, nämlich der in Kopenhagen. Und da waren ja auch die Erwartungen sehr groß. Der Gipfel ist dann ja gescheitert und mehr oder weniger ohne Ergebnis zu Ende gegangen. Mich würde interessieren, was haben Sie daraus gelernt? Was ist damals möglicherweise falsch gelaufen? Was machen Sie in diesem Jahr anders?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I just got the answer to the nuclear question. Can I go back to that a second?
Okay.
My wonderful team in Bonn who's watching have sent me the answer to the nuclear question. So thank you to my fantastic team. So nuclear is mentioned only by 7 countries as part of their INDCs, and it seems not to play a very central role in the INDCs. And other 2 parties actually stated the risks involved and stated that they will not be pursuing it. That's the answer to your nuclear question. Thank you to my team. And I'm sorry I now turn my attention to you. I apologize.
Ich kann mal damit anfangen,
ja, okay, gut.
Dann steigst du einfach ein.
Okay,
also wir sind vor Paris in einer völlig anderen Situation als vor Kopenhagen. Und zwar in vielerlei Hinsicht. Und die Situation ist nicht nur unterschiedlich, sondern sie ist vor allem sehr viel besser. Wir haben heute vor Augen, dass wir klimaverträgliche Technologien zu deutlich günstigeren Preisen oder Kosten, muss man sagen, haben, als das noch vor wenigen Jahren der Fall war. Und wir haben die gesamte Verhandlungslogik vollständig umgekrempelt. In Kopenhagen gab es noch die Vorstellung, an der insbesondere mitteleuropäische und insbesondere deutsche und insbesondere, sagen wir mal, Leute, die sagen wir mal, auch einen Klimaweg glauben, der von oben her gesteuert werden muss. Da war die Vorstellung, dass der Weltklimarat uns die Analysen gibt und sagt, wie viel man an Treibhausgasen deponieren darf als Kollektiv. Und dann gibt es einen Algorithmus, der das auf Staaten verteilt und der wird mit einem Sanktionsmechanismus versehen und so wird dann ein Vertrag eben aussehen. Und so funktionierte die Welt in Kopenhagen schon nicht mehr. Und deshalb ist Kopenhagen auch gescheitert, aus einer von mehreren Gründen, aber ganz sicherlich wegen dieses Grundes, weil man noch kein gemeinsames Verständnis davon hatte. Jetzt wachsen die Klimaschutzbeiträge von unten auf, ein Bottom-up-Prozess. Und der hat eine enorme positive Energie ausgelöst. Für uns, also wenn ich mal aus meiner eigenen Vita herausdenke, war das sehr gewöhnungsbedürftig, weil man zunächst mal vertrauen muss, dass das, was Staaten auch bereit sind zu tun, dann auch wirklich getan wird. Ich glaube, dass wir auf dieser Basis zu Ergebnissen kommen werden und dass Sie, Christiana Figueres hat das ja eben gesagt, letztendlich einen schnelleren und wahrscheinlich sogar einen besseren Klimaschutz bringen werden, als wenn wir uns auf die Frage von sanktionsbewährten Regimen, die von top-down kommen, konzentriert hätten.
Sie ein Wort zu Kopenhagen?
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I can add, because I think there's so many differences that we could be here for 2 days just discussing the differences between Paris and Copenhagen. But perhaps in addition to Staatssekretär's comments, I just look very quickly at the 3 prime factors of change in economic policy or in economic development. First, technology. Cost of solar has come down 80% since 2008, has increased 40% Cost of wind has come down a little bit less, but also increased 40%. So wind and solar are now grid parity in at least 40 jurisdictions around the world, very different to what we had before Copenhagen. Finance, we now have capital markets shifting because they have understood that the risks are no longer as much with fossil fuels, with renewable energy, but rather with fossil fuels, because they have understood that the advance of policy and the threat of physical impacts of climate change are going to make these fossil fuels having to stay underground. Then the risk perception of fossil fuel investment has really switched, and the risk investment of renewable energy has come down dramatically. So you now have already $2.6 trillion of capital markets that have market funding that has already begun to shift away from dirty technology into clean technology. And on policy, just to give you a couple of numbers, very impressive that before Copenhagen, we had not even 100 laws or regulations having to do with renewable energy, energy efficiency, or climate change. And today we have 800 around the world. So you see a huge groundswell of enabling environment of technology, finance, and policy, and that crowned by the increased political will that Staatssekretär has talked about, because of the understanding that it is in their own interests.
Frau Kollegin, bitte.
Yes, I wonder, there was a question asked before to Mr. Flasbarth, but I would like to ask it to Ms. Figueres. To what extent does the German Energiewende still stand out globally in its ambition and scope?
Absolutely. There's no doubt that the world continues to look to Germany for leadership. There's also no doubt that the world looks to Germany to understand the complexity of this. This is not a straight line. This transformation toward low carbon is a very, very complex transformation. And so all of the lessons learned, because I think both Germany but expanding to EU, there's nothing that you can say that, you know, there's no silver bullet, there's no perfect formula. This is definitely a new development that needs to learn from its mistakes and needs to learn from its opportunities as well. But there is no doubt that the world is very much looking at the continued progress of the Energiewende, and in particular at the continued political support of the German government toward this Energiewende, because for one simple reason, my friends, the world is starved for good examples. There are just not that many good examples of countries who have been able to get themselves out of depending heavily on fossil fuel generation over to renewable energy. And all of them have to do it. So they are definitely looking toward Germany.
Weitere Fragen, auch von Kolleginnen oder Kollegen, die nicht Mitglied der Bundespressekonferenz sind? Dann sind Sie noch mal dran, bitte.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I come from Norway, and one of the issues in our country is that we want to have other people reduce their emissions and pay for it. You know, in English, I think you mentioned many of the plans are including carbon markets. I wonder to what extent can rich countries not having to reduce their own emissions, but pay others to not emit theirs?
There's this very simple mathematical understanding here. Most of the emissions in the future, by far most, are going to come from developing countries, because it is the developing countries that are growing in population, that are growing in energy demand, and that are growing in infrastructure build because of very rapid urbanization. So most of the emission reductions will be coming from developing countries. The industrialized world has already flattened out mostly on their greenhouse gases. So it is simply mathematically impossible to reach the emission reductions on a global level that we need to reach if it is only the industrialized countries. The industrialized countries will never be excused from leadership, never, because they have historical responsibility. At the same time, one of the ways in which the industrialized countries can show their leadership is to first reduce their own emissions, as all of them have already been quite clear how they're going to do it in their INDCs, but also help the developing world to reduce those emissions. And that can be done in different ways. There can be foreign direct investment coming straight from the private sector. There can be public sector investment, which is comparatively very, very small. And there can be carbon market finance. And that is actually being considered by at least half of the countries around the world as a very interesting source of finance to reduce emissions in the developing world, which is where those emissions are going to grow. That does not excuse any developed country from reducing at home.
So, dann danke ich unseren Gästen, dass sie alle unsere Fragen beantwortet haben für heute. Herzlichen Dank. Ich habe das Gefühl, das sollten wir nicht zum letzten Mal gemacht haben. Die Einladung steht hiermit.
Danke vielmals.